Okay.
Welcome. I'm Bruce Palmer, President of the Jewish Federation of the Sacramento region. Thank you for joining us this evening. I also want to acknowledge the presence of our great mayor of Sacramento, Darrell Steinberg. The Federation thanks you, Julie, for your generous contribution. We really appreciate it. We are in the midst of a critical community campaign. The attendance here tonight shows not only the strength and concern of our community, but our dedication to the safety of our brothers and sisters in Israel. Back in the spring, when thousands of rockets rained down on Israel, many of these rockets fell directly in our sister city of Ashkelon. We, the Federation, and our Sacramento Jewish community knew help was needed and that we must act decisively to support our brothers and sisters in Ashkelon. So we reached out to the Consul General, Shlomi Kaufman, and his office, who connected us with our counterparts in Ashkelon. It was a sobering experience when our leadership joined with our friends in Ashkelon for a Zoom call to discuss the situation and what we could do to help. We were shocked when we found out that many buildings in Ashkelon, many filled with families and children, are without bomb shelters, and so many of our brothers and sisters were without refuge when these awful attacks occurred. You will hear more about this effort and our progress so far, but before we continue, I want to take a moment to introduce to you Shlomi Kaufman, Israeli Consul General to the Pacific Northwest, and a wonderful friend of our Sacramento community. Consul General Kaufman, we are so grateful to you for your continued support and connection to our Sacramento community, and for all that you do to keep us connected and informed. Thank you for being with us tonight and for your tremendous help in this effort. I now turn the program over to you.
Thank you so much, Bruce, and it's a great pleasure to be with you tonight. First of all, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart and from, on behalf of the people of Israel, the people of Ashkelon, for your continued support and standing with Israel. And this is not something which we are taking for granted, and we remember that, we cherish that, and we'll keep it in our hearts. So all of you on the call, and of course the Federation, which leading the effort and leading this friendship, thank you for being there. I also want to acknowledge the presence of my deputy here, Matan Zamir, and our Director of Government Affairs and Director of Press, Charlie Lawler, who is from Sacramento, and Joshua, who is with us, who is directing our press and public affairs department. Thank you for being, and thank you for that support. Also, thank you, Mayor Darrell Steinberg, for being here on the call and for your support for the state of Israel, and for taking the time to be here with us tonight. So, in times of strife, when we felt that we are under, when during the times we were under attack, we know that there are friends here behind us and people who are supportive of us. And the Jewish Federation of Greater Sacramento is continuing to express its solidarity and support for the state of Israel. And this support is thanks to Bruce and to Willie and to all of you who are on this call. I would like to take a step back, and before to talk about a little bit earlier than last September, when California faced historic wildfires, we sent firefighters to aid in response, and some of them were from Ashkelon. And the first place they visited was Sacramento. And it's not a coincidence that the first place to visit and the first place to connect between the firefighters and the people of California was Sacramento. And they were welcomed warmly by the mayor and by Willie and by the Federation, and were supported during Shabbat meals, with Shabbat meals where they were deployed. So I want to thank you for that support. And tonight you're demonstrating the support for the people of Israel. When I was in Israel during May, it was tough experience to be under the rocket attack. And thinking about, I was in Israel with my mom during that time, and under the barrage of rockets, we all felt that the challenge of surviving this time. The people of Ashkelon, some of them do not have shelters. Some of them have harder time to pass this period, in a period which Israel and mainly Ashkelon and the cities around Gaza received over 4,000 attacks. So you guys decided to stand up. And in my conversation with Willie, when I was back in May, when I was back in Sacramento in June, we sat together and spoke about Ashkelon and Willie came with this idea of how you can support us. And tonight is a reaffirmation of your support. And I want to thank you for that. It's something that we will remember and we'll never forget. And when people say that Israel doesn't have a better friend than the United States and the people of America, you are showing that tonight. And remember that you don't have a better friend than Israel and the Israeli people. And that's why whenever there is a problem, when there is a crisis here, we're always happy to stand up for that. And I think that the fact that you're all here tonight and ready to support Ashkelon, to support the people who's been under barrage of rockets in May for 3 weeks, but constantly in the past years, that shows your amazing, tremendous support. So thank you for being here. Thank you for unwavering standing with Israel. Thank you for thinking of us and the people of Ashkelon.
Thank you so much, Consul General, and we really appreciate your support and the fact that you took the time to be with us here this evening. Hi, everyone. My name is Deborah Gonzalez. I'm the immediate past president of the Federation, and I want to thank all of you for joining us tonight and for your continuous support in this effort. And while the attacks on Israel were really devastating to all of us, one small silver lining is that it provided the opportunity for our Sacramento community to reconnect with our sister city of Ashkelon, a bond and connection we're so grateful to have reestablished and one that we really don't want to let go of again. Up until a few weeks ago, I had been planning I was taking a trip to Israel, I'm doing a bike ride in Israel, and I was going to be taking a detour to Ashkelon, and we wanted to, pack one of those big cardboard checks in my suitcase to present it to the city. Unfortunately, trip has been canceled due to COVID. Hopefully in the future, when the borders are open, when it's safe to do so, I hope to be there again soon. Originally, the Mayor Tomer Gam was going to join us this evening, but he was unable to participate. But he does send his gratitude and greetings to our community. We are instead fortunate to hear from Miri Alit, who is the Deputy Mayor of Ashkelon. She has recorded a message to our community, along with English subtitles for those of us who don't speak fluent Hebrew. Aside from, in addition to Miri's role as the deputy mayor, she is also the Commissioner of Informal Education and Women's Rights. And we do appreciate her taking the time to connect with us.
חברי קהילת סקרמנטו היקרים, נעים מאוד, כאן סגנית ראש העיר אשקלון מירי אלטית, הממונה על החינוך הבלתי פורמלי וקידום מעמד האישה. בראשית דבריי, אני רוצה להודות לכם בשם ראש העיר תומר גלם, שנבצר ממנו להופיע בפניכם הערב, על תמיכתכם בעיר אשקלון לאורך השנים, ובעיקר במהלך מבצע שומר החומות. פעם אחר פעם, הוכחתם את חברותכם הנאמנה בשגרה ובחירום. במהלך המבצע גיניתם את התקפות הטרור על תושבי העיר ועמדתם לצידנו. העיר אשקלון בשגרת היומיום שלה היא עיר שלא עוצרת ונמצאת בתנופה אדירה של פיתוח ובינוי. אנחנו העיר המבוקשת בישראל למגורים בפעם החמישית ברציפות ומיישמים הלכה למעשה את החזון הציוני. לצד זה אנחנו חווים לעתים קרובות מדי הסלמות ביטחוניות שמפרות את שגרת החיים השלווה בעירנו. כתוצאה מכך, תושבים רבים משלמים את מחיר הטרור בחייהם, בגופם ובביתם. אלפי ילדים ומבוגרים סובלים מחרדה שמלווה אותם שנים רבות, ונזק גדול נגרם לעסקים ולכלכלה המקומית. כיום, ל-40,000 מתושבי אשקלון אין את האפשרות הבסיסית להגן על עצמם בשעת הזקה, בשל היעדר מיגון קריטי בשכונות הוותיקות בעיר. אלפי קשישים, מבוגרים, ילדים קטנים, אמהות, נאלצים למצוא לעצמם מחסה בתוך 30 שניות בלבד, שלעיתים כלל לא מספיקות. לכן, התרומה שלכם לבניית מקלטים ומיגון לתושבים חשובה מאין כמוה, ואנו מודים לכם מקרב לב. תודה מיוחדת לפדרציה היהודית של סקרמנטו, על היוזמה והארגון של ערב ההתרמה, למנכ"ל הפדרציה ווילי רכט, לנשיא הפדרציה ברוס פומר ולחברי הדירקטוריון. תודה גם לשגרירות ישראל בסן פרנסיסקו. כולי תקווה שנזכה לימים שקטים ובטוחים, בהם תוכלו לבוא ולבקר בעירנו היפה, וליהנות ממגוון האפשרויות שהיא מציעה. בשמי ובשם ראש העיר, אנחנו מאחלים לכם חג שמח, שנה טובה ומתוקה. תודה לכם והמשך ערב נעים.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We're so grateful for your words and leadership and for all that you do to keep the citizens of Ashkelon safe and connected. On behalf of the Federation and our Sacramento community, we look forward to strengthening our connection, and please know that you always have friends here in the Sacramento region. As you heard from Bruce, many of the buildings, including schools in Ashkelon, are without the proper protection from rockets and bombs. Can you imagine having your children in school when rockets begin to fall and there's no safe shelter to protect you in the short notice you have? Or having your elderly parents needing to seek shelter quickly and no shelter close by? Well, this is what it's like for many in our sister city. And today we're grateful that we will hear from one of Ashkelon's residents, Yonatan Tal, who's joining us live and has agreed to share his experience with us. I want to thank the Consul General and his office for their help and connection tonight. And special thanks to you, Yonatan, for getting up early in the morning in Israel. And thank you so much for making yourself available to speak tonight.
So good morning from Israel and good evening to you, my friends in Sacramento. For those who didn't hear me, my name is Jonathan Tal, and I'm honored to be with you in this morning. I want to start by thanking you, Sacramento Jewish Federation and the Israeli Consulate for organizing this. I want just to start with a little story about living in Ashkelon in a war. Most of the time, Ashkelon is a very nice city, it's a very peaceful city. It's near the sea, it has a very big historic park, but I think it's in average, it's 2 weeks or 3 weeks in a year. The that Ashkelon is a war zone. It's a war zone mostly because it's, I think, 10 miles north than the Gaza Strip. And I think 2 weeks in a year, there's a lot of conflicts over there, and they started throwing missiles at Ashkelon. And because Ashkelon is very close to Gaza, so you have 30 seconds to run away and you catch a shelter. I think that the first day is the most terrifying day, because in the second, third day and ahead, you expect missiles, so you are staying in safe place. And if you don't have shelter, so you are hiding under a table or in the hall in your building, and you're convincing yourself that it will be okay. But the first day you don't know what to expect, and that's what happened in my grandmother's funeral. 2 years ago, she passed away, and we went to the cemetery. And when we went back from the cemetery, my father was driving me in the highway, and the sirens started yelling, and they started throwing missiles. And you don't really know what to do, and you don't know where to go when you are in the middle of the highway. You have 30 seconds, and you don't really can catch a shelter. So my father, I was 38, and my father would tell me, "Don't worry, Jonathan, everything is going to be okay, and the Kippat Barzel will catch all the missiles." And then it was, I think, 400 meters of us, a missile fell, and it was giant boom. And he was telling me, "Don't worry, Jonathan, it didn't fall." And I told him, "Father, I saw it falling in front of my eyes." And it was terrifying. And believe me, I was in the army, in the special force called Maglan, and I wasn't terrified in the army like I was in this time. I felt helpless, and I had nothing to do. So that's living in Ashkelon for 2 weeks in a year. And then after 2 weeks, they stop throwing missiles, and Ashkelon become peace again. So that story of Ashkelon is my city, my parents' city. My parents are 70 years old. My father is almost 80. And we live Ashkelon most of our lives. We love Ashkelon. And I think that illustrates what the importance of your donation, because in 3 weeks in a year, Ashkelon is a very, very a frightening place to live, and it's in average, and you need a shelter. You need to go, because even if you convince yourself that if you are hiding under the table, everything is going to be okay, sometimes it's not okay. And because of that, I want to thank you. And it's a great honor to me to speak with you and to hear you and to appreciate your careness. And I want to thank you very, very, very much.
Jonathan, thank you so very much for joining us. I hate to put you on the spot, but we rarely have an opportunity, especially while we're sitting in Sacramento. I don't know if anybody has any questions, but if you'd be open to answering any, if there are any, I think now would be an appropriate time to do so. If not, we can continue on. But first of all, thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing with us.
You're very welcome. And if you have questions, I will be happy to answer.
I don't know. So, okay, well, we will continue on. And Julian, I just saw a message. We will answer that question shortly. But Jonathan, thank you. Again,
You're
I know
welcome.
it's very, very early. We very much appreciate it. You know, we're doing what we can, but we don't have to live with that threat. And so, you know, you being able to provide that, I can't imagine, you know, driving home from my grandmother's funeral, you know, and dealing with something like that. It's unreal. So thank you again. I really want to thank the Consul General. We have a tremendous relationship, and we're grateful for the connection. And I think our the Federation's strong connection with your office helps us all feel better connected and more connected to Israel and our duties and our obligations to the state of Israel. I also want to thank specifically Matan and Charlie, who have worked really, really hard to help bring this program together and to connect us with the leadership of Ashkelon and you, Jonathan. And so thank you very much. I want to thank the Federation leadership who have worked tirelessly on this. And I want to thank the donors who we'll hear more about. So I now turn it over to Don Gilbert and Phil Fine. Thank you all.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Jonathan. We really appreciate it. And thanks for your story, because it really gives us a sense of what you as other citizens go through. You know, the impact on the citizens of Ashkelon who endured nearly 16 years of conflict, which all began when Israel disengaged from Gaza in 2005. And instead of the Gazans exploiting this opportunity to build schools and businesses and hotels and a thriving economy, as well as a democratic institutions, which would all be measures that would have helped Israelis gain confidence in their intentions and lead to a Palestinian state, but instead they embraced Hamas, whose charter calls for the killing of Jews. The first attacks directly on Ashkelon began 15 years ago, I think in 2006, when a rocket hit an empty school in the middle of the city. They were next attacked the next year in 2007 by increasingly advanced Katyusha rockets. These rockets have ranges of over 20 kilometers and give the citizens of Ashkelon only 30 seconds, as Jonathan said, to find shelter. There were numerous attacks between 2008 and 2010, but it wasn't until 2011 when Iron Dome was first deployed. And even so, between 2011 and 2021, there have been numerous escalations of attacks on Ashkelon, resulting in property damage, injuries, and loss of life. The years of attacks have resulted in untold psychological trauma and PTSD, and it's the children of Ashkelon who've perhaps been most impacted. After 15 years under the threat of rockets from Hamas and Islamic Jihad, nearly a third of the 140,000 citizens of Ashkelon are still without access to a bomb shelter when attacks occur. Don knows all too well the impact on the citizens of Ashkelon and his close friends under the threat from Gaza. Don?
Thanks, Phil, and thanks everyone for participating tonight. Since May, some of you have heard me talk about Shira's and my friends, Ellie and Norit. For those who haven't, here's the story. I attended Tel Aviv University on the Overseas Student Program in 1982 and 83, and I had an Israeli roommate, Ellie Ben Levi. Shortly after we became roommates, I met Shira, who I eventually married, and Ellie met Norit, who he eventually married. And the four of us became fast friends. Over the years, we formed a close bond, and we're much more like family than we are friends, at least the good side of all that. And Shira and I eventually obviously settled in Sacramento. Ellie was raised in Ashkelon, and that's where Ellie and Norit settled. Shira and I had 3 kids. Ellie and Norit had 3 kids. We raised our families in parallel in very different places, of course, but in parallel. Ellie's parents came from Tunisia, a centuries-old Jewish community in Tunisia. They were kicked out of Tunisia shortly after Israel was established, and all their possessions were confiscated. And so they arrived in Israel penniless. Norit's parents came from the Jewish community, a Jewish community that had been in Iraq for 2,000 years. They were kicked out of Iraq, and all their possessions were confiscated after Israel was established, and they too arrived in Israel with nothing. So now back to Ellie and Norit. In Ashkelon, Ellie became a manager at a local grocery store chain, and Norit became a social worker employed by the municipality of Ashkelon. As you know from Phil's discussion, Ellie and Norit and their children have been the target of thousands of rockets the past 15 or 16 years, fired by Hamas with the intent of maiming or killing them. This last go round was 997 rockets. When a rocket gets past Iron Dome, one of Norit's jobs as a social worker is to go to the site where the rocket hit and care for those in shock or grief or both. Unfortunately, that's a job in Israel. Ellie and Norit have lived in the same apartment for 25 or 30 years. It doesn't have a bomb shelter. So when the sirens sound, they huddle under the stairway. So some 70 years ago, their families were stripped of their possessions and kicked out of the countries they were born in because those countries and the people in those countries couldn't tolerate the existence of a Jewish state. And now some 70 years later, Hamas is trying to kill Ellie and Norit and their children because Hamas cannot tolerate a Jewish state. 3 generations, all of whom are targeted because they're Jews. We all grew up with the slogan, never again. Hamas's goal is the opposite. Hamas's goal is again. We tonight have an opportunity to help safeguard some of our brothers and sisters in Israel, like Ellie and Norit, who do not have access to a bomb shelter when the siren shrieks and the terrifying moment arrives. Thank God we have the financial wherewithal here in Sacramento to help protect our brethren in Ashkelon. You're all generous people with a long history of stepping up and supporting our community here in Sacramento, and we really, really appreciate that. Now is a chance to make a tangible difference in Ashkelon. But it's even more than a tangible gift of a bomb shelter. It's the intangible opportunity to show solidarity and moral support for our Israeli brothers and sisters who so often are criticized for simply defending themselves and feel abandoned. Thank you in advance for your generosity. I'm going to turn it back over to Phil, who will tell you about our goal tonight, but we can always go beyond our goal if that's what people want to do as well and build more bomb shelters. Thanks for your indulgence.
Thanks, Don. Don and I, on behalf of the Federation leadership and board, are asking for your support in reaching our objective of raising a minimum of $60,000 and more, as Don stated, to purchase 2 community shelters for the city of Ashkelon. I want to personally thank those of you who joined tonight and who've already committed to this effort with your generous contributions and helped us already raise $31,000 for this goal. Now I'll turn it back to Willie for payment options for your donations. Thank you so much for joining.
Don, Phil, thank you so much. Hello, everyone. So there's a few options right now. One is that there should be an email in all of your email boxes with a link to the donation page. I also just put the donation page into the chat, which you can click on directly and it'll take you to our donation page. You may also mail a check to the Federation and put Ashkelon in the memo line. 100% of all the funds we raise for this project will go to this project. And the last is, if you have any questions or you want to discuss, you are welcome to call me. My cell phone is 312-919-2320. Again, 312-919-2320. I'm sure you can also call Don or Phil or Bruce or Bob, who actually probably called many of you prior to tonight's gathering. So thank you. Thank you. If you have any questions, please let us know. And now I turn it over to Bruce Palmer.
Thank you, Willie. Phil and Don, thank you for your eloquence in making the case for us tonight to reach our goal of $60,000. You have been tremendous leaders in this effort, and we thank you. I also want to acknowledge our Federation Vice President, Bob Dresser, who is here tonight, who has raised thousands to support this effort. Bob, thank you for all your hard work and dedication to this cause on behalf of our Federation. To all our donors and attendees tonight, thank you so much for taking the time to be here and for your generous support. We could not do this without you. If you have not done so already, let me repeat, please go to the link in the chat to donate now. Thank you again for your time and generosity. Stay healthy and safe and have a nice rest of the week and a happy and peaceful new year. Shana Tova.